I'm going to glue up the stretchers first. So what I've done to prepare is I had already surfaced the inner and outer surfaces because I wanted the tenons to size. So those have been planed. I've rounded over these edges because when this is together, this edge is continuous, whereas the inside edge is, has this other part here, and I don't want to risk rounding over in the wrong place there. So I'll round those over after this is together. I was going to wedge these, but they fit pretty well. There's not really gaps in this direction. So I'm just going to glue it together, and I may, once it's together, pin them from the bottom just to add a little extra insurance, because there will be some, when this is together, there will be some forces pulling this apart. So I'm going to go ahead and put glue in the mortises. I can put it pretty heavy there because any extra glue just gets pushed out. And then I'll get the tenon faces. I'm using hide glue as the Tide glue. And I'm using that because it has a long working time. That didn't work. Okay, I'm going to put this in the vise now to put this together. So this piece had broken off earlier. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'll let that dry. While the glue is drying on the stretchers, I'm sanding the legs. So I rounded over the corners of the legs. I've got a 3/16 round over on the inside corners and a 1/4 inch round over on the outside corners. So just ran those through the router. So a little sanding here. Okay, the glue's fairly dry now, and I've drilled some 3/16 holes into here to within about, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch, 3/16 from the top. So I'm going in the bottom, so you're not going to see them. So I'm going to just chamfer these a little bit, and then we'll glue them in. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and sand everything flat, and I don't want to sand out here. I don't want to remove, I don't want to get that any narrower, but we'll go ahead and smooth that out, and then I'll round over these corners. Okay, the stretcher is all ready to go. So I'm going to put this together. So I've got numbers still written on here. Okay, and then I've got numbers on here. There we go. Okay, it's the first time it's all together. It looks good. All right, so I'm going to take it apart now and cut the slots for the wedges and the stretcher tenons and the leg tenons, and cut some wedges, and then we'll put it together with glue. Assuming I can get it back apart. I want to come in about 3/16 from the top of this. I'm gonna put the wedge just at the top and move that out. So I've got this set at 3/16. I typically want about a 1:8 ratio, so that's for every inch I want about 1/8 of an inch wider. So that's close to 2 inches. So that would mean I'd want to come out 1/4. That's about right. So now this is going to get cut off, down about there, so it won't be quite as thin up there. Now at the bottom here, I want to be roughly the kerf of my saw. And there we go. So about like that. So I've cut my wedges. So my cut for the wedge was cut at roughly an 8-to-1 ratio. So for every inch of depth, I went 1/8 of an inch wide. I want my wedges to be a little wider than that to make sure that at the outer part where we're going to see the tenon coming out, that it's tight there. So you can see there's a little bit of gap there. So I cut the wedges at about a 9 or a 10-to-1 angle as opposed to an 8-to-1. I did that with this jig. So I just laid out what the 9-to-1, 10-to-1, whatever. I just measured over instead of 2 inches down and 1/4 over. I went 2 inches down and 5/16 over. So anyway, so I cut that on the bandsaw, cut a similar one over here, and then I had a block of wood that just sat there. Put this up against the fence on my bandsaw, and the let's see, it would have been what, like that. So the block of wood sat here, and then this was my offcut. So I'd make one angled cut, flip it over, make a straight cut, or parallel cut, I should say. So anyway, that's how I created those. Also, I cut these. This used to be a little bit longer. I cut this at an angle, and about 1/8 of an inch past the leg here. So if I was to put that in here, it gives me an extra 1/8 of an inch or so. Yeah, for the same reason, if this was really long and I put the wedge in and it got tight, way out here, it might not be tight where I'm going to see it eventually. So I wanted this to be roughly the same length as it's going to be when it's done. So with these cut, the tendons in the legs were already about the right length, so I'm not messing with those. So I think I'm ready to glue this up. I just realized I should also point out that these are, they're cut a little short. I don't want this to come to a point, because if it did, it might bottom here before it gets tight here. So I cut all these off so they're a little bit blunt. All right, I think I've got everything ready to go here. I've got my parts. I've got my brush, something to put the glue on. Got the wedges ready. I've got a hammer to pound the wedges in. I've got the dead blow to tap things together as necessary. I think it's showtime. Yeah, I particularly want to get glue, of course, not only on these long grain faces, but on the outside. The wedge is going to push the tenon out at the outside more than on the inside. So that's why I'm making sure I put glue on the end grain there. So I've got my numbers written here and right next to the shoulder there. And I need a rag. One thing I forgot. Okay, that's number 1. So those go almost all the way on. Some of these were a little wider than others. Okay, that looks pretty good. Got a little gap there, but I think I'm going to have to live with that. All right, I'm going to wipe off the glue, let it dry, and then we'll trim those tenons.